All right, friends, this is page 2 of the review, starting off here with number 3. So it says we're going to use a new f of x and g of x, and we are going to do the same operations we just did at the bottom of page 1. It looks like these functions might be a little scarier, but it's really going to be about the same thing. All right, so I'm going to bust on through it. We're adding the two functions. So now that really just, once you write it, it comes down to combining like terms. I know it's tempting to want to do a bunch of stuff in your head and like just do it right away. I suggest you take a second and write things out because I think it makes it a little easier to not make mistakes. Sometimes you get going kind of fast and you make a mistake. I know I do. And so if you'll take a second and write this step out, I think it'll help. I'm just going to check my math really quick. Okay, great. So there's that one. Here is subtracting. So subtracting is definitely the more interesting problem because it's the one that's, you've got to know what you're doing, and people love to make mistakes on it. So what did I say on the last page? When you get to that minus sign and you're supposed to subtract g of x, please make sure that you use parentheses and then distribute that negative. So some people are going to be tempted to do all of that in one step, and I can't stop you from doing that, but what I can tell you as a teacher who's taught for longer than you've been alive is that's where people make their mistakes. So just be careful if that's what you're interested in doing. And yes, I have been teaching longer than you've been alive. It's ridiculous. I'm old, but I know things. Okay, so there's that one, 2x squared minus 6x. Right here is where people are going to mess up, so be really uber careful right there. Think to yourself, this is where Ms. Haas said everybody messes it up. I'm not going to be the kid who messes it up right there. Okay, so now we're to multiplication. So this is going to get a little cray-cray. Well, maybe not that cray-cray. That was overselling it. Can you see where I'm at? Yes. 2x cubed minus 6x squared. I'm going to double check. 2x cubed minus 6x squared minus 5x squared plus 15x's minus 3x plus 9. Cool. These dudes go together, those guys go together, and that's on its own. So minus 11x squared plus 12x. Am I right? Am I right? Looks like it. Plus 9. Okay. And then, ooh, sorry, I got sideways. And then now we're going to go here with our f of x divided by g of x. Okay, step 1, if you recall, was to factor. It doesn't look like there's a ton of space on this one. So if I'm using my common sense when I go to factor, most likely your lovely teachers like myself are going to give you one that's going to factor. And guess what? We're probably giving you one that's going to make a 1 as well. So I am guessing about what's going to go up here. I'm guessing that there's a 3 and a 1. Ooh, that doesn't totally make sense now, does it, Miss Haas? Nice try. Okay, so here's what you want to do. I do believe that one of these is going to be x minus 3 to match that one, but I totally ignored the fact that there was a 2 right there, so I got to be careful. So I'm going to put a 2x here. Now, that 2x, does that give me a 2x squared? It does. The 3 times the 1, does that give me my 3? It gives me a 3. I got to pay attention to the minus sign. So this right here would give me a 6x, and this would give me a 1x, which would work if this is negative and this is positive. So I'm going to double check that again. This gives me 2x squared. This gives me a positive x. This gives me minus 6x, which those two together is a minus 5x, and then that gives me a negative 3. Now, I expected this to be a negative 3 because I expected this to make a 1 because that's the problem we're giving you. Before I do that, though, before I cancel anything, I'm going to go ahead and limit that domain. What would make this a 0? I hope you're thinking to yourself a 3. And so now these guys make a 1. And I get 2x plus 1. But I also have this domain restriction. And we teachers are going to be looking for this as well as that. To get full credit, you have to have that domain restriction on these. Okay, so now we are to number 4. Oh, synthetic division, fun times. Here we go. Okay, so to be able to look at your A and B really quick, do you notice that they are linear factors right here? We're supposed to be checking to see if it's a factor, but this has to be linear before we can do it. Notice over here, this is linear. If this little guy had an x squared or if this little guy had an x squared, we could not do synthetic division. We would have to go over and do long division. Okay, so this is the factor. I am going to put the 0 or the root in the box. So that's going to be the opposite of this. The way I talk about it usually is what would make this a 0. That would be a 3, so that's what goes in the box. Make sure that you get your coefficients from here. Make sure it's not missing any terms along the way. You'd have to put a placeholder in of 0. But this one's all good. I'm going to bring down that 1. So now I'm going to multiply, then add, then multiply, then add, then multiply, then add, over and over until you get to the end. So multiply, that gives me 3. Add, that gives me a -1. Multiply, that gives me -3. Add, that gives me a -2. This is my remainder. Okay. So if I were to write this out, here's what I would be looking at. X minus 3, and then I'd come here and I'd go, okay, that's going to be an x minus 1. If I multiplied those out, I would not get this. I'd get really close to it, but I wouldn't get it. I would need to subtract 2, my remainder, to get it. Okay, so this, if I were to multiply out and subtract 2, I would then get this guy right there. Okay. Alrighty tighty, so here we go. So in the box here, if that's an x minus 2, that means I need to put a positive 2 here. X cubed has a 1, that has a 1. Do we have all in descending order? Yep, -1, -10, draw a line, bring it down. Ooh, I'm sorry, I gotta go back. I didn't finish this problem. Look at your directions. It says use the remainder theorem and then answer the question, is it a factor? So my bad, I gotta come back over here, sorry about that. The remainder theorem is asking you to do this. It's asking you to find f of 3. So you know what we put in the box over here? That's the same thing that's going to go right here. It's the possible 0. It's not necessarily a 0. What would make it a 0 is if we had gotten a 0 here. But I'm going to put what could possibly be the 0 in there, which is a 3. And now I'm going to use my original and substitute in 3. When I simplify, that's 9 minus 12 plus 1. Which is 10, blah, blah, that's a -2. Shocking. That's not shocking. I knew that was going to happen, and hopefully you did too. So what does all of this tell you? Not a factor. How would we know it's a factor? If we had gotten a 0 right here. Okay, sorry, I didn't answer that whole question. Let's try this problem again. We've got it set up. Come down. Multiply, that gives me a 2. Add gives me 3. Multiply gives me 6. Add gives me 5. Multiply gives me 10. Add gives me 0. Yay, I just got 0 for a remainder. That's telling me that this is, what am I trying to say? Oh, that tells me that x minus 2 is a factor. All right, so what would my answer look like? X minus 2 times x squared plus 3x plus 5. I'm looking right here. Yay, plus nothing because there's no remainder. Yes, x minus 2 is a factor. Make sure you pay attention to these directions. I know that I just gave my kiddos a quick quiz the other day and nobody wanted to read that part. And so you'd get points taken off for not following directions, so please pay attention. Now this one doesn't say use the remainder theorem, it just says use synthetic division. It just says divide using synthetic division. So, okay, here we go. I'm going to move up. In the box, hopefully you know it's going to be the opposite of that. Put a -1. This gives me a 3. -2. I am missing my x term, so I have to put a 0 and then a 5. I like that same quiz that I gave where I saw the other error. The big error here on that quiz was to not put that. And that really messes the whole thing up. You can't get it right. You're wrong from the very beginning if you do that. Let's multiply. That gives me a -3. Add. That gives me -5. Multiply. That gives me a +5. Add. Multiply. Okay. Yay. Got a 0. I'm going to double check my math. 3, -2, 0, and 5. That's correct. Blah, blah, blah. -3. That's -5. +5. Add. -5. Okay. Perfect. I am satisfied. So there we go. Yay. Okay. For number 5 part B here, I'm gonna do negative 3 in the box. 2, that's my x cubed term. 11, 18, 5. We're not missing any terms along the way. So minus 6, add down, I get a 5, multiply, that gives me a negative 15, add, that gives me a positive 3, gives me a negative 9. Which one I add gives me a 4. I like to box up my remainder. It makes it easier for me to see the quadratic that's left right here. I know that this is quadratic because if this one was x cubed, I'm going to be 1 degree less than that. So here I'm looking at x plus 3. Okay, and then now I've got 2x squared plus 5x plus 3 minus 4. Does not go in there evenly, or else I would have gotten a remainder of 0. Okay, let's double check. Okay, that's it for page 2.